This is from the website thewaythetruthandthelife.net.
This video is to criticize Russia today on their policy of manipulating the truth as it relates to America, whether America is dealing with Islam or America is dealing with the destruction of the Twin Towers, 9/11. With the 9/11, they put the goofy conspiracy theorists on Russia Today. And with Islam, they're not saying the truth, but throwing dirt and giving sympathy to those who seek to undermine and overthrow America. The same people from the same indoctrination are doing their best and to undermine and overtake Russia, and they have a birthing policy that they're going to ride the Democratic bus to do just that in Russia and the rest of Europe. That's according to a Turkish general. They don't have to do jihad. But the truth is there, out there. Why it's not being spoken by our leaders. And I will criticize President Putin. He's in my prayers. I feel more comfortable with his leadership and the place of Christianity under him than I do with Obama, who wants to make sure that his daughters can murder fetuses because it's legal and he has the power to promote that agenda, and that children deprived of the care that they need to grow from the narcissism to homoerotic, that they have enough care to grow to heteroerotic and grow to care for children and keep a mother breastfeeding in the home. That's a dead issue. So we've got a dead future, but that those are side issues. I'm going to go right to the problem with this RT presenting a sympathetic image, and the deception of Islam is being promoted by them. I'll show you that now.
Surveillance in a post-9/11 world's par for the course. But when news broke in 2012 of the New York Police Department going outside of its jurisdiction to spy on large swaths of New Jersey's Muslim community, people were a little surprised. The NYPD's violation of civil liberties by indiscriminately spying on another state's religious population seemed obvious.
This statement is preposterous. If you would wake up and see the truth of what's happening and what has happened ever since Mohammad started by personally beheading all the men of the Jewish Qurayza tribe who had pubic hair. Over 600 he personally beheaded. And he had the Surah of Abrogation, which says that the later surahs are what count. And that then came Surah number 9, that it is a world-dominating, murdering, theocratic cult with the goal of world domination that deceive, unless you have the power, then they either convert or die. If they're monotheists, they can live as subjects that pay protection. But to have RT present this is unbelievable. I had to walk through a subway where all these people had been murdered by Islam. I was in Moscow in 2000 to get married when this happened. We had to walk through the subway where that took place. I have to ride on airplanes south out of Moscow, where 2 of the planes in that route were blown up by women with bombs in their burqas. I have to go through an airport where over 40 people were murdered, Domodedovo. by a Muslim blowing up a bomb. This is one of 3 girls beheaded as they walked through an orchard on the way to school. This was a Ramadan present, a Muslim country. The man was arrested and put in jail, but he was let go home and run away. It is not a religion. It is a theocratic, world domination, murdering cult. That's the truth, and it hasn't changed. Over 100 million were murdered in India, Pakistan, as they went in 900 to 1100 until the remainder of the Hindus got their act together and started annihilating the Muslims who had been annihilating them. But out of this came the Roma gypsies who escaped from the Muslims and came to Christian areas. And went around in their wagons for 1,400 years in Christian country areas where it was safe. But that's another story. Here, look at the Boston bombing. Look at the 2 Coptic Christians in New Jersey beheaded. Look at the beheading in Florida. Look at the throwing stones at Christians in Michigan at the Arab festival. Look at the demonstrations in Florida with hate, send the Jews back to the ovens. Look at what is going on and the truth of it. Now here is a video that shows the truth, and then I'll get back to RT.
Announcing Book 5 of the Crackpot Conspiracy Series. Islamic World Domination, Fact or Fiction by Martin and Patricia Riot is now available at Amazon. Is Islam really a religion of peace? Do you believe the war on terror is really over, as the Obama administration claims? Do you believe the ongoing jihadist attacks around the globe are peaceful? Did you know that the Koran, or Quran, the Holy Book of Islam, commands its followers to spread Islam by the sword? And Muslims have been doing just that for centuries. The Quran also instructs its followers to lie, that's known as taqiyya, or to lie by omission, known as kitman, in order to spread Islam. But one of the biggest lies is that Islam is a religion of peace. Instead, Islam is a religion of war, violence, and vengeance, to be spread by the sword.
This is March 8th, 2014. Just look at the news from last week. The Turkic Muslims that invaded a province of China and they claim they want to be respected, they want to have their own nation, and they're murdering. They went into a train station last week in China and stabbed 33 people to death and put 100 and some in the hospital. This is not new. It goes on in the Philippines. It goes on in Nigeria. It goes on in Pakistan. It goes on in the contested area there north of India, Kashmir. And then in Pakistani Kashmir, they've murdered all the Christians and Hindus. Look at, or they've converted or escaped somehow. Look what's going on. It's not new. It's been ever since Mohammad went back and fought his own polytheist tribe, and the Jews didn't help him, and he had the Surah of Abrogation. But he had already built a pyramid scheme of rewarding the men that followed him with women and booty. They murdered the men of the tribes as they went out building his army. They murdered the men that wouldn't join him. Those that did got rewards. And as they just went on a murdering rampage in the name of Allah. And yes, Jesus is in the Quran, and that's the peaceful surahs before he had the Surah of Abrogation. But Jesus was not the Christ. He was a subordinate of Muhammad. Please, this is a murdering theocratic cult. It's spoken of that they will worship a new god, the god of forces. And that's what's going on. It is a cult. But let's get on with it.
The goal of Islam is that Allah's word and religion reign supreme. According to the Koran, the holy book of Muslims and Islam, Muslims are to pretend to be friendly to unbelievers until strong enough to overcome them. Then Muslims are to make war against unbelievers, that's non-Muslims, converting them by the sword. Also, according to the Quran, any people conquered by the sword must then convert to Islam, or submit to virtual slavery, or be killed. Some list of choices, huh?
That RT prevents this ignorant professor claiming that you're you're a psychiatric case, Islamophobic, if you take a stand against this murdering theocratic cult. And the travesty of it, rather than saying the truth, when I taught high school, the assistant principal, Michael Leparty, at a faculty meeting said, "We have a problem." I was in the suburbs, and in the 60s they built a bunch of subsidized apartments in the suburbs to move blacks out of the Buffalo into the suburbs. They had been busing them to bring greater immigration, but then they moved them and gave them the welfare apartments in our school district, and all of a sudden we had a big black community. But in this faculty meeting, the assistant principal, Michael Leparty, said, "We have a problem. We have school dance, and the black boys like the white girls, and the white girls like the black boys. But the white boys aren't interested in the black girls, and nobody invites them to the dance. So they come to the dance, and nobody dances with them. We got to help these black girls with this problem." And we did. We encouraged our male white students to show some kindness and dance with the girls, and faculty members danced with them if no one else was asking them. But then my wife in Armenian talking about that, and what I learned was a simple thing. Why are women all over the world converting to Islam? I understand the men in prison. Islam gives them a license for their hatred. But why do the women convert when they have to suffer a second-class status under Islam? It's very simple. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with religion. The Steven Pinker video on that California University program that has all these researchers present. He presented on what essentially was the myth of the noble savage. For something in order of millions of years, the hunter-gatherers, and up to 60% of the men died by violence, and it was because of attacking or being attacked by the young men, or by the men, to get the young women from the other tribe, because inbreeding destroyed the tribe. So this violence, women being taken by rape, and there's a simple law of nature. God's one of God's laws. What has babies is what goes on in the future. And the women who were attracted to the invader were the ones that tended to survive and have babies, even though they hated the rapist. Yes, there's a reason for women to hate men. They've been raped historically. It's a genetic awareness that men are the cause of the babies, and men have raped them for millions of years. Great apes don't have the intellectual logic to cause-effect relationship to relate to the babies with the rape. They breastfeed them to the second molars, many of them, and they don't kill their babies because they don't associate it with the rape. They just take the baby and care for it. There's survival in that too. You can see a cat nursing a dog, or a dog nursing a cat, and all these kinds of things where there's a maternal caring instinct, because that tends to survive also. So at any rate, women are converting to Islam. That's normal because it's an invasion.
Make no mistake about it. The goal of Islam is Islamic world domination, and that's as instructed by their holy book, the Koran. Allah will only be satisfied when the entire world is Muslim. The teachings of the Koran, the basis of Sharia law, give no rights to women or children, and Islamic supremacists are pushing to have Sharia law in the USA. Islamic supremacists are working in the USA and around the globe to gain the power necessary to overthrow and dominate all infidels, and that would be us, folks. Islamic supremacists are using taqiyya, remember that's lying commanded by the Quran, to lull us into accepting Sharia law and eventual Muslim domination. Barack Hussein Obama is allowing infiltration into the highest levels of our government to these Islamic supremacists who have sworn to destroy us from within by our own hands. Obama is even allowing Islamic supremacists into sensitive positions of national security and national defense. We ask you again, do you believe Islam is a religion of peace? Do you believe the war on terror is over? Get your copy today of Islamic World Domination, Fact or Fiction by Martin and Patricia Riot, and discover the truth for yourself. Islamic World Domination, Fact or Fiction by Martin and Patricia Riot is now available at Amazon.com.
The NYPD's violation of civil liberties by indiscriminately spying on another state's religious population seemed obvious. And in 2012, 8 Muslims filed a lawsuit against the city for targeting a community for its religion. But last week, a federal judge threw out the case altogether, alleging that the surveillance was not a violation of civil liberties because it conducted to prevent terrorism, even though no acts of terrorism were actually prevented from the spying.
This is so preposterous. Look what happened last year.
A gruesome double murder mystery tonight in New Jersey. Police say who did it isn't the mystery. Someone's under arrest, in fact. The mystery, they say, is why the accused killer, and this is the gruesome part, cut off 2 men's heads and hands. The victims are reportedly from Jersey City, but their remains were found buried in a town southwest of Philadelphia. Eyewitness News' Jeff Pegues with the story. He's in Jersey City for us. Jeffrey?
Yeah, Bill, shock and sadness in this community tonight. People who know the victims say they are recent immigrants from Egypt, 25, 27-year-old roommates who worked hard to send money back to family in Egypt. How they died isn't a mystery tonight. Why they were murdered is. On the streets of Jersey City along Bergen Avenue, to the naked eye, it's not obvious, but to members of the close-knit Coptic Orthodox Church, the pain is real.
It's a shock, you know what I mean? Like, something like this don't happen to people like that.
Now that they know 2 members of this church have been brutally murdered, but no one in this community seems to know why.
My friends, this is a no-brainer. Every Quran has Surah 8, Surah 9, which says that they won't convert, cut off their heads, cut off their fingers, cut off their hands, terrorize them. It's a no-brainer. Read the book, and the Quran is in every mosque. That's why they're watching the mosques, because children are being taught to memorize to murder in the name of Islam. And they do it like robots. Wake up. It's nothing new. We got to help these Muslims. My Muslim friends, please wake up and prevent your children from having to read this book that teaches them to murder. The peaceful imams where I go in Russia are being murdered by your cult, your murdering cult. No Muslim is safe. They're killing more Muslims for not behaving according to the Quran and getting them to shape up. Yes, once you get the children, like in the madrasas in Pakistan, you can make robots out of them. Please, wake up. Look at the truth.
Was not a violation of civil liberties because it conducted to prevent terrorism, even though no acts of terrorism were actually prevented from the spying. And while there's a similar case pending in Brooklyn, this ruling could set a dangerous precedent for the future. Well, earlier I was joined by Deepa Kumar, professor at Rutgers University and author of the book Islamophobia and the Politics of Empire. I first asked her to break down why the judge justified the constitutionality of the program.
If you look at the background of this case was brought by the Center for Constitutional Rights and Muslim advocates on behalf of New Jersey Muslims who have been being surveilled for at least the last 12 years, since 2002. So mosques and schools and community centers and student groups and even grade schoolers, by the way, were surveilled. And the idea behind this lawsuit was to say that this is unconstitutional and this program should be suspended.
How do you defend yourself against a murdering cult that has murdered ever since it was written down to do that? And you've got ignorant people like this defending it as a peaceful religion. Yes, they're taught, present yourself as a peaceful religion until you have enough people to impose your will, which is going on worldwide. Look at it.
But what the judge ruled was that actually no harm was done by surveillance, never mind the psychological trauma that New Jersey Muslims have faced, having infiltrators, in all of their institutions and so forth. Apparently no harm was done. Apparently the harm that was done was by the Associated Press, which broke the story. The Associated Press did some amazing investigative journalism for which they won a Pulitzer Prize. The judge decided that they were the ones who caused harm, not the actual surveillance. So here you have it in one fell swoop. You have not only the justification for racial and religious profiling.
Let me interject here. I got some more death threats while I was in Russia last year. And I know that the Boston bombers, the Federal Security Service, FSB, had informed the American authorities, and they never followed up on these Muslims from Chechnya that were in America. But I called and reported the things to the FSB. Microsoft, in their Philippines office, when I was attacked on my computer, they wanted to wipe everything out. I won't let them. They talk about, oh, the NSA is watching and this. Let them watch me. I've been watched so much because I go to Islamic sites and I'm in Russia twice a year for 14 years. When I come to the border and they look, before when I was driving, I go to the Canadian border, they just boom, go, go, go. They look on the screen. I've been checked so much, they know exactly who I am, where I am, and all that. And I'm glad, because when I have these Islamic murder threats, I want the FSB monitoring what goes on in my computer and who's hacking it. I had a website, the company was hacked because of my website up there. Look what's going on. Don't be afraid of everything. Get the help you need. Be open about your business. If you're a God-fearing, human-loving, decent human being, what do you have to hide? I don't have anything to hide. Of course, I don't like it if I look at a pornographic thing on YouTube or something like that. Somebody would know that happened, and those kinds of things happen. But don't be in hysteria over there minding my business. There are evil criminal gangs, whether it's from the time 700 years Muslims ruled the Christians in Spain. In 1492, they finally pushed the Muslims out, the same year that Columbus discovered America. I've been in South America, Mexico, Paraguay. They have a Christian name, but they oppress the people like the Muslims oppressed the Christians. What happened, Spain got rid of the Muslims, but the Christians had been oppressed by the Muslims and their Jewish administrators for 700 years. So when they got the freedom, the upper class the narcissistic class with their wet nurses and babysitters. The powerful became priests, and the sons the eldest son inherited the property. In Spain, the other sons became priests or military officers, and they went to South America. Now you see them live behind these walls with glass on, so the poor people can't get in. They oppress just like the Muslims oppress them. If you go to South America, in many countries, the wealthy class have women, they're married to one, but they have apartments with others. Just like the Muslims, they have more than one wife in reality. Let me interject. This is where the culture of terrorizing and beheading came from that's in Mexico. So look how this can corrupt the culture and the problems we have with our genetic load from what survived, the alpha male and all that stuff that is part of our genetic heritage that brings on the women's liberation, pacifism, and brings on the what do you call it, anarchy. The men have been abused too. Many men don't want any power over them, just like the women. But we have to have authority to deal with evil. We got to get rid of the priesthoods that are indoctrinating people. We got to have healthy homes with mothers that are willing to breastfeed. But let's get on with it.
But an attack on the press, right? An attack on the Associated Press, and the idea that the press should be watchdogs of the government.
It is shocking that they would actually go as far as claiming that the harm wasn't the surveillance system itself, it was just the press of the fact that surveillance was happening. I mean, what do you think about that claim?
Well, I think this is a completely specious claim. I think that this ruling absolutely sends the wrong message. It sends a green light not only to the NYPD to continue these practices of surveillance, but to police agencies all over the country that they can, with absolute impunity, violate the civil liberties of Muslims. But I want to read from the 10-page document that the judge produced. This is what he said. He said, quote, "The police could not have monitored New Jersey for Muslim terrorist activities without monitoring the Muslim community itself. The motive for the program was not solely to discriminate against Muslims, but rather to find Muslim terrorists hiding among ordinary law-abiding Muslims," which is just so deeply racist.
I have to interrupt here. Look at the harm being done by demonizing healthy people that are concerned for their community with this evil cult, and demonizing them as being a psychiatric basket case, Islamophobia. You are against this evil cult. There's something wrong with you. Look at the manipulation, the subterfuge. Read the Koran. Read the history. Read where the Roma came from. Read about Mohammad beheading the 600 men of the Jewish Qurayza tribe because they wouldn't help him against his own polytheistic tribe. Study, look at the murders from when Mohammed started building this murdering pyramid scheme, theocratic world domination cult.
New Jersey for Muslim terrorist activities without monitoring the Muslim community itself. The motive for the program was not solely to discriminate against Muslims, but rather to find Muslim terrorists hiding among ordinary law-abiding Muslims, which is just so deeply racist. It's a form of cultural racism that says that people who practice Islam are sort of programmed to turn to terrorist activities. And this is really the mindset of the NYPD. They released a document in 2007 called Terrorism in the West, the Homegrown Threat, in which they argue that there is a four-step process of radicalization in which, if you're just a young Muslim man, you are already in stage one. Then you become religious, you stop smoking, drinking, and you turn to religion. You're on a fast track towards jihadization, right? And this is really such a simplistic and problematic notion of why people turn to violence. And frankly, this is cultural racism.
Martini's a former Republican congressman, a Bush appointee. He's even been removed from a racketeering and murder case in the past for his lack of impartiality. So considering his past, how much do you think Martini's personal politics played into the ruling?
Oh, I'm sure it had a lot to do with it, because there are at least two schools of thought, if you will. The Republican school of thought, the more conservative school of thought, tends to be very simplistic in the way it views the Muslim terrorist enemy threat. And I have no doubt that that played a huge role in this.
How is the NYPD justifying spying on locations completely outside of its jurisdiction?
Yes, well, frankly, this entire program is not legal because a CIA agent was responsible for setting this program up. So first of all, the CIA should not be involved in any kind of domestic spying of this sort. So there is so many ways in which, you know, what the NYPD should be doing, what the CIA should be doing, has been completely violated in this case. And, you know, the case was actually brought by a man by the name of Hassan.
Let me interrupt again. That Muslim American psychiatrist that murdered all those brave soldiers in Fort Hood did it because that is what Muslims are commanded to do, and he was following the Koran. That's the truth. The highest allegiance of any Muslim is to the Koran. That's why in Russia, they're murdering Muslims, because they're not good citizens of Islam. They're spreading the fear amongst the Islamic community to shape them up. And that's working. The children are being indoctrinated with this. There's more and more suicide bombings, just the way it is in Nigeria, in Pakistan, in the Philippines, in Myanmar, in wherever Muslims start to gain enough power to bring terrorism.
Is a army veteran, and I believe went off to fight in the Iraq War. But then he comes back and finds that his mosque is being surveilled. So the logic is, we'll send you to go fight for oil and so forth. But when you come back, you're part of a suspect community.
But what about this faithful Muslim, Hassan Akbar, United States military former sergeant, born Mark Fidel Cools, converted to Islam, then murdered his comrades for fighting against Islam. On March 23rd, 2003, he threw 4 hand grenades into 3 tents, which other members of the 101st Airborne Division were sleeping, and fired his rifle at fellow soldiers. In the ensuing chaos, Army Captain Christopher Seifert was fatally shot in the back. Air Force Major Gregory Stone was killed by a grenade, and 14 other soldiers were wounded by Akbar, mostly from the grenade shot. So why wouldn't we want, when the Quran says to do this and he's following the Quran, why wouldn't we want to follow those who have been indoctrinated with the Quran?
Unbelievable. Deepa, you mentioned kind of the message, the clear message that this ruling sends. I mean, expand on that. What kind of precedent do you think that it will set for future widespread surveillance by law enforcement agencies across the country?
Well, there's already been, since 2002, widespread programs of this sort. The NYPD is not the only institution. The FBI, Various, local police departments have been involved in this. But the key to keep in mind is that in New Jersey, for instance, even though this program has been in effect since 2002, there has not been one single lead related to terrorist activity, let alone a terrorism conviction, right? And actually, this is consistent with nationwide statistics. In the 10 years since 9/11, of the 150,000 murders in the United States, Muslim Americans have been responsible for only 33 of them, right? And so the question is, why are so many resources spent by local police departments, by the FBI, by the National Security Agency, and so on, surveilling Muslim Americans? Well,
wait a minute. What about the man whose bomb didn't work on the way to Detroit? I fly in and out of John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. What about the Muslims that they found out by this surveillance that they had planned bombing John F. Kennedy Airport that I fly in and out of? What is this? This amounts to, what do you call it when you betray the truth, betray your country?
What it comes down to, I think, really, is that we have seen the massive development and growth of not only a surveillance state, but a national security state that relies on this logic that there is a 9/11 around the corner, there are these horrible Muslim terrorists everywhere, so we have to expand this national security state. And ultimately, Abby, let's be clear, this national security state isn't about keeping us safe, right? You think about what Americans die from. They die far more often from things like workplace-related injuries. 45,000 Americans die each year from lack of access to health care, right? But there's no war on the for-profit healthcare system. What it is, I'm arguing in the next book that I'm writing, is really about a national security state that guards the interests of the 1%, right? And justifying that national security state is about creating this enemy and creating these programs that go after, by the way, not just Muslim Americans, but all dissenters.
Do you think that the election of New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has made a tangible difference in both the approach of minority surveillance and stop and frisk tactics? Because I know a lot of people are kind of disappointed so far.
Yeah, I mean, rhetorically, I think it's made some difference because de Blasio ran on a platform where he not only rejected stop and frisk, but he also promised Muslims in New York City that he would curtail, this sort of blanket surveillance program, and only in specific cases where there was actionable intelligence, he would sanction this kind of surveillance. But to the best of my knowledge, Abby, he hasn't actually done anything about it. And the one thing that he has done is actually appoint a new police commissioner who, if you know who this man is, William Bratton. He was the chief of the LAPD. And while there, actually the number of stop and frisk cases expanded by 50%. And furthermore, he was part of putting forward, an LA version of the New York program. It was called a community mapping program, which was going to do exactly the same thing with Muslim Americans. It didn't come to fruition because there was a huge public outcry.
Deepa Kumar, professor, Rutgers University, author, Islamophobia and the Politics of Empire. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Look, if Harvard can disgrace itself, the faculty, by getting rid of a president that says the truth about the differences between men and women. Look at the physiology. Look at the physiology of brain development, the number of brain cells, and why they specialize in different ways. But that's another subject. This university that this woman is involved in could redeem itself. She's a lying, deceiving, degrading the country she's in. She's not worthy of a position of authority or influence. People need to say the truth. I pray that Putin will start saying the truth about the terrorism. The Muslims are going to overtake Russia. They have a birthing policy. And the communist practice of daycare for children degraded the family. So many children So much abortion, so many children in orphanages, so many parents on drugs and alcohol. And in our home church here in America, I know 4 families that adopted children. They paid over $10,000 to bring an autistic child here and give it love. And out of the damage to the Russian pride, they made a law that no more adoptions to America. Now, I have a lovely granddaughter in Russia that I'm the only man she's ever known. And I'm going to be with her. I'm there. I have Russian residence. I live there 6 months of the year. But why don't they wake up and say the truth about what the Koran teaches and what has gone on ever since this theocratic world domination murdering cult was founded? I pray for our leaders. I pray for homes. Communism destroyed the home. Women's liberation brought daycare. And now look at the degradation of the home in Russia. No women in the home. I have a granddaughter, God bless her soul. I'm the only man, the closest thing to a father she knows, because that's the way it is in Russia. And my wife and I are raising her as best we can. And we were there with loving care for her parents. Her father died in our home in December of 2011, and her mother in December 2012. And we have this granddaughter. Fortunately, the granddaughter's mother had managing a beauty salon not far from the home, and she breastfed her up until 4 years old. So she has a foundation. She's a very loving child. My friends tell me she'll end up corrupted once she gets to school, but that's a whole other thing. We need to bring family love, a mother, and it's not a word, it's a mother that was raised by a mother that breastfed her and loved her, and she can do the same to her children. Look at autism. It's exponentially increasing because of daycare. You can tell with the brain scans of the child before they can walk and talk. When nerve growth factor was present in that area of the brain, they didn't get the stimulation they needed to develop. Wake up with all this stupidity going on. And it isn't the mother's fault. The ability to be a mother is an animal level thing. They need to have had a good mother. My uncle was a mink rancher in Pennsylvania, and that was the secret of being successful. It is with any mammals. Choose the mothers well. How do you do that? Ones that had a good mother, that breastfed them and cared for them. We need to keep the mothers in the home and breastfeeding till 4 or 5 years old, and mothers in the home and until they're at least 6 years old. And what's the matter with the mother being in the home? We've got all this automation. Why not respect the man and let him support a family? I want to close with a word for President Putin. I understand your pain. You're in my prayers. I understand how much the Russian people have suffered, both under communism, under fascism, under Stalin, a Georgian, and under the liberal Jewish community that was a large part of the communist leadership, and all the money they've stolen. I wished you would go after them. My wife and all them people lost a bunch of money when they bankrupted the companies to take over the control and ownership of the mineral wealth of Russia. But that's another thing. President Putin, I care about Russia, and I know how they've suffered. Don't let your pride get in the way. I lent my brother-in-law, I think it was $8,000 to buy a Mercedes bus, a used Mercedes bus, a tourist bus, to go from Minvodi to Elbrus. Elbrus is for those who don't know, is the highest mountain in Europe. It was a tourist attraction. Well, I helped my brother-in-law by this used tourist bus, had a toilet on it, and could take 52 people. Well, did you, certainly Mr. Putin knows, but for those that you don't know, from Mineral Vody, where the bus would take them to Elbrus, where my brother-in-law would drive, Muslim terrorists killed all the people and a driver on a bus, not my brother-in-law's, that was later, a different bus. And then they went to Elbrus and blew up the ski lift, and then they went to a neighboring city and killed some policemen. Because they want Islamization of that area. They've got enough Muslims in there now. They're going to terrorize, and they have. The non-Muslims are scared to death and fleeing. Look at the demographics. They're ethnically cleansing. And it's not ethnic, it's cult cleansing. The murdering cult is cleansing it of any peaceful Christians or anybody else. Just like they blew up those Buddhist statues in Afghanistan. Wake up, people. It's nothing new. They murdered over 100 million between 900 and 1100 years after Jesus, and they're murdering rampage into India and Pakistan. Look at what's happened. And then the people, the only ones that survive are the ones that submit. The rest are in a pile of dead bodies, and many of them with their heads missing. So wake up. Call the truth the truth. Let's help the Muslims get free of this Quran.